So welcome everyone to the Radiant Torah with teachings of Rebbe Nachman. And thank you to Dr. Eleonora Gaudis, for sponsoring these weekly Parsha classes. And we are going to dedicate today's learning to, first of all, everyone in Eretz Yisrael who is under, unfortunately, attack by terrorists, and we want to keep them in our prayers, and we want to also dedicate our learning to anyone who needs a refuah, anyone who needs a healing and recovery. Okay, so we're going to begin. Oops. Okay, 1 second. I'm sorry, everyone. It's the phone, it's the computer, it's just everything all at once. We're going to begin with the new book of the Torah. We are in the 4th book of the Torah, and the book is Bamidbar, and the Parsha is Bamidbar. Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe Bamidbar Sinai. Be'ohel moed, be'echad lechodesh hasheni, be'shana hashenis, letzeisem me'eretz Mitzrayim lemor. And Hashem spoke to Moshe in the Sinai wilderness. Okay, at that point in time, we don't even know if it was technically a desert. But spoke to Hashem in the wilderness, in the Ohel Moed, in the tent of meeting, on the first day of the 2nd month, and that corresponds to Rosh Chodesh Iyar, which is ending today, is the last day of Iyar today. Tonight is Rosh Chodesh Sivan. And in the 2nd year of their exodus from the land of Mitzrayim. Now, if you just give me 1 moment, I'm going to make Charlene a co-host. Okay, there she is. Okay. So this is a really, of course, a really apt Parsha. And we know that when we learn the Parsha, we know that whatever we're learning for that time corresponds to what is going on in the world. And one of the amazing things we have to keep in mind is this holographic and logic way in which Hashem runs the world. And runs the world in such a way that every single facet of what is going on, every event, every place, every time, every situation, specifically relates to that point in time and space in previous generations and in our generation today. So they're very real messages for us each week from the Parsha. And especially also during this period of Sfiras HaOmer, we also know that during this time, we are told by Rebbe Nachman that whatever conversations you hear during this period of counting the Omer correspond to the specific Sfira of that day. Okay, we're not going to necessarily go into that today, but to keep in mind that this really is true for every holy sefer, okay, the Torah, and also the teachings of the Zohar, which are commentaries on the Torah and this specific time. So the first thing we want to know is why Hashem announces specifically the place and the date of when his next announcement is going to take place. And what he's going to announce next is the census. And then he's going to, in the Torah, is going to tell us the arrangement of the tribes and their locations. Okay. So why is he announcing the time? Because we're supposed to commemorate this specific time as we lead up to Shavuot. The reason why he's mentioning to us Bamidbar, the place very specifically, is to call attention, okay, says the commentators, to this idea that we were given the Torah in the wilderness, specifically in the wilderness. Why? Or the desert. Why? So there are many reasons. One of the reasons why is because had the Torah been given in Eretz Yisrael, the inhabitants there would claim a special relationship to the Torah. And this is what the Midrash says. However, we know that, yes, they do have a special relationship in Israel because Israel's at a higher level. However, we also, anybody living in Chutz La'aretz, anybody outside of Eretz Yisrael also has an equal share in the Torah. As a matter of fact, each of us has an equal share in the Torah. This Torah was given to all of us, not just the people who resided in Israel, but the people who are residing in New Jersey, Connecticut, Iraq, Iran, England, doesn't matter, Canada, okay, even Ohio. So the Torah is given to all of us for all times equally. And that's very important. The next reason why Hashem is going to reveal the Torah in the wilderness, and he's calling attention to it, is because it's a hint to us that in order to really, if whoever isn't muted, please mute yourself because I can't see you right now to mute you, but I can hear people making noise. Thank you. Because the Torah is, in order to connect with the Torah, to learn the Torah, to fulfill it, to grow in it, to embrace it, to love it, a Jew must be like the Midbar, humble, lowly like the wilderness, empty, okay? The Medrash actually says hefker, ownerless, which means that nothing gets in the way between us and Torah. Now, we see that we have jobs, we see that we have busy lives, we have so many things to do. How can that be? So the answer is in everything we do, we embrace the Torah. Rabbi Nachman often spoke of this. He said that he didn't necessarily want his followers to sit and learn Torah all the time and not work, because to go out into the world and work means that you are applying the Torah and doing mitzvahs that you can't do if you're sitting in a pristine fashion. By the way, there's nothing wrong with sitting and learning Torah all the time if that's your particular life mission. And we'll talk about particular life missions in a minute. So this idea also of being very humble and putting Hashem and his Torah first, okay? And we all can do that in our own way. The way one person does it, the way I do it, the way someone else does it, doesn't have to be the way you do it. We each have to find that space, that emptiness, that wilderness inside us so that we can make a place for Torah there, preferably in our hearts, not just our heads. Now, what is this comment about hefker, about ownerlessness? So why is is it important to be ownerlessness, without an owner? What does that mean about a Jew? We just read last week that there were slaves even. So a Jewish slave is not owned, okay? The Jewish slave, as a matter of fact, it's in the Gemara, it says that somebody who acquires for themselves a slave acquires for themselves a master, okay? A Jew is never owned. However, we each have our own way of giving in to a kind of ownership that isn't healthy for us as spiritual beings, okay? So what do I mean? So these include certain pressures, okay? One pressure is the pressure of social groups. It doesn't matter how religious that social group is or non-religious that social group is. What matters is that that group doesn't determine who you are. That group or those people don't define you so that you are owned by them. You're concerned constantly with their perceptions of you. Okay. And this is a message about being ownerless. The other thing that very often takes us over, aside from social pressure, okay, and that can own us in a way. I mean, look at a celebrity. Their lives are not their own. All right. The other thing that can do this is financial worries or even financial success can own us. Okay. It can take us over so that, and as well as possessions, all these things can make us very busy, both intellectually and physically, materially busy with things that might take us away from Hashem and his Torah. So we want to embrace this concept of being like a midbar. By the way, that doesn't mean we have to live in poverty and throw away things and leave all social groups. Not at all. We have to live in the real world. And whatever you have, for sure, Hashem gave you, whether it's a social group or whatever. But the idea is to not let that own us, to really keep in mind that that's not what owns us. Okay. Now, okay. So there's another. There are more reasons why we got the Torah in the wilderness. Another one is, and I spoke about it briefly, is that a wilderness has nothing in it. It's empty. So what does this mean? So it means that our intellect, we think that we are operating in a plain vanilla kind of perspective. Each of us has a hard time seeing our own bias. Guilty, I'm guilty, okay? We each have a hard time seeing our own bias. And what happens is that bias colors everything. The way we were raised, the way we respond and react to the way we are raised, the way we want to be. And all of this fills us up. What else fills us up is popular culture, secular culture, even religious culture, the news, the times, excuse me one second, okay, the news, the times we live in, everything fills us up with foreign elements, with things that are really not Jewish, not spiritual. However, we live in this world, so what can we do about it? So obviously we're all on Zoom, which means we're all connected to the internet, which means we've all been exposed to all kinds of chachmas, of wisdom. Rebbe Nachman cautions us with this. He says to avoid as much as possible, okay, he said completely, but we say as much as possible because it's very difficult coming from where we're coming from, any secular chachmas, any secular wisdoms that may contain elements of Torah that certainly are true, but it's mixed in with elements that are untrue and even dangerous. So this means secular philosophies, secular approaches to life. Now, again, we have to find our own individual starting points for this, okay? Everybody's holding somewhere. And again, we're going to talk about individuality in the context of the Parsha and what this means, but we have to find our own starting point for where we are now and how we can move little by little by little without looking at some idealistic, unreachable end goal in the way we live, away from being colored by secular approaches to thought. Again, this doesn't mean that you're starting from white and you're going to go to black or black to white. It's not so clear-cut, especially today. Today, we understand that influences are mixed up. We have the world is heating up, as I mentioned before, very much in the beginning about Israel. We see once again this roller coaster ride of terror, roller coaster ride of attacks. We had I can't necessarily talk about politics, but I heard this Ilhan Omar condemned Israel for defending herself. I mean, we have insanity in the world today. We have mamish insanity in the world today, up and down, back and forth. And as Rabbi Nachman says, people do not even know what the truth is. It's so difficult. The only truth that we know that's a bottom line for a Jew is the truth of Torah, because sometimes we will go and we will get involved and we will see what's going on and we'll peel back the layers of what we thought was true, and we will be sorely disappointed. Again, this includes politics and things like this. So philosophies and politics and ideologies, as much as possible, we shouldn't let them control our way of thinking. Okay, we want to be free to think in an alignment with the Torah and the ideas that Hashem has given us. And it's very difficult to do. I'm acknowledging that. It's difficult for me. It's difficult for everyone because we don't always have awareness of how we've been influenced. So briefly, the solution to that, the first step is to learn Rabbi Nachman's teachings, to learn the teachings of any of the tzaddikim that turn you on, whatever they may be. And then the next thing is to make hipodadut. Talk to Hashem every day about where you're holding, how you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you're doing. Okay. Okay. I know I say it over and over again. All right. So that's why the wilderness, the date is to commemorate the date. There are other things around that. Now we're going to go to the concept I mentioned, the census, the count of the Jews. Okay. So there's so much around this idea of counting Jews. So first of all, it depends, there's a machlokas about this point is the fourth census, and some say it's a third census, but it's really the fourth census that was taken. And if you look in your parsha past where I read up to, you will see rows and rows and lists of numbers. This tribe had this many, and so on and so forth. And if we read it, just plain read it, it just looks like, a laundry list of numbers, but there are reasons for it. So we are being counted only by Hashem. We are not allowed to count. And if you notice, so for example, when we go on the Uman trip, and I have so many women sitting on the bus, even if I have a number that I know, I try not to directly count 1, 2, and so on. Try to get names. People will tell me their names and I'll check off. We don't count. Only Hashem counts us. We won't talk about why we don't count. That's a whole subject. But why does Hashem count us? So Rashi says Hashem counts us because we're precious to him. He loves us. What do people count? What they love. Okay. People count money. They count their children. Okay. They count their books. They count their students. Okay. Whatever it is. They count the flowers in their garden. Whatever is precious to a person, that's what they're naturally drawn to count. And it's not a judgment statement. It's just the way it is. Okay. What is precious to Hashem? Okay. Each of us. We're precious to Hashem. So he counts Jews. That's what he does. I always think, I know this is a very odd connection, but I always think of the tulip insanity that went on in Holland a few hundred years ago, where they went crazy for tulips. And people would acquire, tulip bulbs were fortune, thousands of dollars or whatever that was in those days. And they would acquire these tulips. They became so precious to them. And I read a story once about someone who sat and counted his tulip bulbs until they all shriveled up. He didn't even bother to plant them. Okay. That's not how Hashem counts. Hashem counts us and then he plants us. Where? In the land. That's going to come next later on. Okay. In the Chumash. Okay. But we're precious to him, so he counts us. So the 4 times, so I want to go a little bit into the times that the Jews were counted. Okay. The 4 times the Jews were counted, was the first time, if we're going to go by the 4, was the 70 members of Yaakov's family that went down to Mitzrayim, that went down to Egypt. The next time is when Hashem took us out of Egypt, which was 600,000 people were counted. Okay. Then on the 11th of Tishrei, which we know already, the Chet HaEgel, the sin of the golden calf, Hashem counted the Jews a 3rd time to see who was left, essentially, who was a Jew. This count did not include the Erev Rav. Okay, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. And then on the 1st of Iyar, as I mentioned, 2,449 years after creation, so just about 6.5 months after the other census, Hashem counted us again. Now, why weren't the Erev Rav counted? So I want to explain who the Erev Rav were. Some of you may know. The Erev Rav were the mixed multitudes. Erev is a mixture. It also means evening because it's a mixture of light and dark. Okay, Erev with different vocalizations, and Rav is a lot, a multitude. Okay, the Erev Rav were the Egyptians who left, and others, by the way, there were others too, like merchant soldiers. I can't remember what they're called, mercenaries, who left Egypt because they basically had a sense that there was a God and that the Jews were right. Okay. However, the Erev Rav, the Midrash tells us, were the ones who instigated the Chet HaEgel, the sin of the golden calf. And the Erev Rav, okay, did they accept the Torah or not? There's a machlokes about it. There's a machloket about it. There's a disagreement, a conflict about it. But what we understand is that they really weren't all in. Okay, you know, the ones who are all in, the ones who sit up front and wave their hands, go, ooh, pick on me. And then there's the ones in the back who are on their cell phones. Okay, they were in the back on their cell phones, so to speak. They weren't all in. And what we know about the Erev Rav spiritually is that in the end of days, the Erev Rav are going to cause us a lot of problems. Okay, so when is the end of days? The era before Mashiach? It's now. And we see that the spiritual legacy of those who are the Erev Rav, whether it's their actual souls or not, whether it's pieces of their soul, all that spiritual stuff, all that mystical stuff doesn't matter. We see that there are people who speak out of both sides of their mouth today. And these are the people that can lead us into danger. And they're the people who don't really have a full belief in Hashem and his Torah. They don't. Okay. So this can include politicians. This can include all kinds of people. Okay. Something to think about, especially what seems like unfortunately, I don't even want to say the word war, but what's going on in Israel today, please Hashem, it should just peter out further away, just disappear. But we know that the Erev Rav is always in that mix. They have a negative spiritual influence. Okay, speaking of Mashiach, most of you already have this book. We sent out many copies. I don't know the exact number. If you don't get this book by the end of the week, or you haven't given us your address, mailing address, you can text it to me or email me your name and address. It's Mashiach, Hope for Turbulent Times. It's sponsored by Dr. Eleanor Gaudis, and it's written Le'olui Nishmas, for an Aliyah, for the Neshama of her beloved mother, Chana Bat Ephraim. And this book is an introduction to concepts concerning the Mashiach and the Geula and the redemption of the world and the end of days. And again, it's just an introduction. It's not, obviously, it's a very slim little volume. Even many, many volumes can't tell us everything that we know will occur or we think will occur. But if you'd like your free copy, just contact us. Okay. You can just contact me. All right. So we did the count and the times that we were counting. All right. So 1 minute. So Rebbe Nachman's leading student, his leading, he was really a tzaddik in his own right. He was a tremendous scholar, author of tremendous works of Torah. Rebbe Nachman says that all, whoever is, would you mind muting yourself, please? Whoever's not muted. Okay, thank you. That all Jews must be ready to wage war for Hashem. However, we're going to get to the next part of the Parsha. We can only do so when we're united. And we must be united in our goal. And I'm going to explain what the overarching goal must be according to Torah. So Reb Nachman continues that the reason Moshe counted the Jews in the Midbar, he was counting those who were ready to fight for Hashem. So we know that he counted the men between not the Erev Rav, but the men between the ages of 20 and 60. Okay. Because those were men in their prime. On a very material level, they were the ones who were able to fight, like literally, physically fight for Hashem. Okay. Each of us counts, though. Each of us counts because each of us is able, and this includes women, able to spiritually fight for Hashem. And how we do it looks slightly different for every person. It may mean, may mean for a man in Israel going out and literally defending the land with a gun. Okay. And it may mean somebody else going to the kosel, going to the kotel and praying for 12 hours for peace. Okay. And everything in between. So we each have to find our own way to wage war, so to speak, for Hashem. It may mean teaching Torah. It may mean ordering some more copies of this book so you can give them out to people. Whatever it is, we each have our own way. Okay. And that's where we get into this idea of the next part of the Parsha, which is this assembly of the mechana, the camp of the tribes. There were, and I did a little visual chart. I hope you all have a good chuckle when you see it. It gave me a good chuckle. Can everybody see that? Okay. So I just need one person to open their
No, I can't see it.
Okay, hold on 1 second. Thank you. Let's see why I can't get that up. Let's try this. Can everybody see this now? One person, just one person.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, you can mute yourselves. So I did a little chart of how the tribes were laid out. And this is the most prevalent opinion, and it's probably the main opinion. And the way it worked in the desert. So the Jews didn't travel willy-nilly, and they were actually in an order. They traveled in an order, and I'll speak about that too if we have time. But the way they camped was follows. The general, actually, I'll start from the middle. This was the Machana Shechina, the camp of the Shechina, okay? The indwelling feminine aspect and presence of Hashem. And that's where the Mishkan was, okay? The tabernacle, the sanctuary, were right in the middle of the camp. And that energy radiated out all over. Does anybody can see me pointing? I don't know if you can see me pointing with my clicker. Maybe you can't. Okay, whatever. Then the next level, and they did camp.
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Charlene. The next level, okay, was Moshe. Okay. And it was Moshe and Aaron's sons. And also, okay, in this, we have the sons, Merari, Gershon, and Kahos. Okay. And these were the Levium. Now, the tribe of Levi is a special tribe. They get a special situation. If your last name is Levi or Levin or anything like that, there are other names as well that are Levi names. It's very possible that your father was a Levi. Not everybody knows if they were or not today, but most people do know, or a lot of people do know, I should say. And the Levium were the tribe that also became part of them became the Kohanim, the priests. So Kohanim are actually a subset of Levium. So we have here the next central section, and then we have Mechana Yisrael, the Israel, the rest of us, okay, well, women belong to the tribe of the husband, but who just belong to all these other tribes. And in each of the corners were cattle, and they could include the cows and sheep and goats. And we had the tribes like this. So I want to discuss the order of the tribes and why and how they were ordered. So just 1 minute. Okay. So in the east, we had Yehuda, okay? And Yehuda was the tribe which Hashem said the kings are going to descend from, okay? So therefore, they camped in the east because it's the direction of the rising sun. And the kings are called a light, okay? They have a special or a special light, all right? So the reason they're called an or, I'm sure you could guess, but because a light guides us. We can see by the light. And when the Jewish monarchy was established, certainly we were able to see by the light. For example, most notably, David HaMelech and Shlomo HaMelech, his son, were guiding lights for us. Okay. There was even a queen who was a guiding light for us, Queen Shalom Tzion. One day we're going to do a class on her just because she's fascinating. Okay. Now, the the tribes, there's always like a lead tribe and then tribes that come next. So then we have Yissachar and Zevulun. So Yissachar also pertains to the east because why? Yissachar was the tribe of the Talmidei Chacham, the tribe of people who were Torah scholars. If you remember, I spoke earlier about Rabbi Nachman said, hey, most people should go out to work, but there are some people who should devote their lives completely to learning Torah and dispensing Torah. Okay, and this is Yissachar, and they are our spiritual light, those people. Okay, even the people who we may not see how they're dispensing Torah, just by sitting and learning Torah, they are bringing down tremendous light into this world and shining light outwards. This is all spiritual. We don't necessarily see it with our physical eyes. Then we have the tribe of Zevulun. And Zevulun is an amazing tribe. They were the tribe most involved in business. And they were also a light. They served the light of Torah. How? They supported Yissachar. So Yissachar could devote their lives to Torah. Okay. However, I want to mention that Zevulun also learned Torah. All Jews learned Torah. Okay. They just were more involved in business. Okay. So Yissachar could be more involved in Torah. And they shared that light equally. Okay. As a matter of fact, some say Zevulun got a higher percentage of it. Then we go to, and there were also well-known Torah scholars who were from the tribe of Zevulun. Then we go to the south. We go to Ruvain. Ruvain, okay. Okay, so the south is where Tal comes from, where dew comes from, and rains of blessing. So where brachas come from that are involving dew and rain. Rain is geshem. It's also gashmius, material things. So Ruvain was considered the first Baal Tshuva, the first main Baal Tshuva in the Torah. Why? Because he had that incident. We won't go into the details here. We'll talk about it in another parsha, perhaps, where he, with the incident involving Bilhah, and he repented. Okay, apologized, he repented. So Ruvain is a light for us. What is that light? It goes back to what I said in the beginning about being humble, being like the wilderness, being able to say publicly, like Ruvain did, we honor him for this. I was wrong. I want to fix it. That's it. That is so huge. That's so huge for some people. It's very difficult if your entire identity is wrapped up in perfection, being right. We spoke before about being hefker, being ownerless. If other people are looking at you and you make a mistake, okay, if your identity is so wrapped up that you can't say when needed, okay, I was wrong. I'm genuinely wrong. I'm sorry. Sorry, Hashem. I'm sorry to whoever I hurt, and I'm going to try to fix it. And that's the message of Ruvain in the South. Then we go to Shimon. Shimon had no brachas specifically, no blessings specifically given to him. So it says that he was placed in between the tribes who could give him blessings. There was a lot of many good things about Shimon too. We'll talk about that another point. And the reason he was bereft is because of what happened with Shechem. And well, that's another parsha. And then we have Gad. Gad, the tribe of Gad, they were actually fighters. They were soldiers. They were warriors. And they had the ability to tap into that power of divine strength. Okay. And so Ruvain was considered mercy because he was able to say, I'm sorry. And he evoked Hashem's mercy. And God was able to tap into that power of strength and necessary retribution. Okay. All right. We'll continue. In the west, we had Ephraim. Okay. And the west is where snow and hail and frost and even the hamsa, the very hot winds, they say, come from hot forces. And these are very negative energies. And this direction first began with Ephraim, who was camped there, who we know was he was eventually was also a warrior, and Menashe and Binyamin also. So we have Ephraim and Menashe were considered two separate tribes by some, one tribe by others. And Binyamin was Rachel's son. And Rachel, okay, for everybody out there named Rachel, lost her life giving birth to Binyamin. And he has a very special strength to conquer the Yetzer Hara. Okay. His name means son of the right. Okay. And anyway, every tribe in this area was promised that despite the destructive forces, the heat, the snow, the hail, and everything that reigned there, that also the presence of the Shekhinah also reigned there to counter effect. Hashem doesn't give us anything negative without a positive counter effect. Okay. Then we move on to the north. And we have in the north, we have Dan. And we have to understand that darkness comes down through the north. And this tribe, Dan, okay, they actually worshipped an image at later points in time. We won't go into all the details, but they were a tribe that was unfortunately connected to darkness. And that was a way for Hashem to kind of remind this tribe, hey, don't engage in any more negative stuff. Asher was actually the sort of the opposite of Dan. Asher was another very wealthy tribe, an exceedingly wealthy tribe. Their name is linked to the name of Ashrei, which means fortunate are we. And Asher was positioned next to Dan so that they could inspire Dan positively. Dan would see that Asher had wealth, but they also had a tremendous love of Hashem, tremendous knowledge of Hashem, symbolized by what? By the olive, okay, and the olive trees. Asher got wealthy mainly through olive oil, and olive symbolizes knowledge, and Dan should be influenced by them. Of course, let me just tell you, really, just as an aside, all the people, there were so many tzaddikim in these tribes, even in the tribes like Dan. Okay, so when I say a negative influence or dark force or whatever, we take that in context. Okay, because a tzaddik is judged at a much higher level than a regular person. And then we have Naphtali. Naphtali also had much material blessing, and their blessing also was needed to connect to and help Dan. Okay. So this is how, let's see if I can unshare this. I don't know how. Let's see. Can I unshare it? Let me see. I don't know how to unshare it. Okay. I'll stop share. Here we go. Okay. We're back. So anyway, and then the cattle were in the four corners because they needed the sheep, the goats, the cattle. Okay. So that's the setup of the camps in the desert. Now, what we have, I want to take this parsha as a whole. Obviously, we're missing various points. It's not just the census and just the camps, but what we have here is an instruction to us about two seemingly opposite points. The first is our individuality, okay, which we learn from these concepts of being hefker, being in the wilderness, being humble, and the census, where each Jew counts, each soul is counted, okay? And then we have this concept of the camp, which was a unified whole. Each group and each person in their place, okay? These are seemingly opposite concepts. What do they teach us? Because both have to be true. They're both in the Torah. So one of the things I want to bring in is that Rebbe Nachman explains that there are two kinds of peace. Peace is shalom, okay? Shalom is related to shalem. It's related to wholeness, completeness, and perfection, okay? These words are related. As a matter of fact, they really are the same thing. They're really the same idea, because if you don't have completeness, you can't really have peace. So Rebbe Nachman teaches that there is one kind of peace that's called a peace in one's bones. And that means a peace in yourself. Each person has to, for themselves, take the disparate parts of themselves and unify them harmoniously. And this entails, again, hitbodedut, you knew I was going to say it, but it also entails real honesty. It's a willingness to be like Reuven and say, this part of me, this thing, this was a misstep. I'm accountable, counting, right? I take count of that. I own it. And that is part of me. And I'm going to turn it around by using that negative attribute, by that not so positive deed, and turn that around into a mitzvah. Okay. Sickness, I'm speaking spiritual, mental sickness can come from denying that part of you. Okay. Most psychologists will agree that this is repression and denial are unhealthy, but their solution is to let it all out. No. Okay. Somebody isn't muted. If you're not muted, please mute yourself. Okay. So what do I mean by this? So this concept is this idea, okay, of acknowledging that I'm flawed. I'm not perfect. Okay. As a matter of fact, I'm so way less than perfect, but I also have goodness. I have that Nakuda Tova that Rebbe Nachman speaks about. Okay. The good point inside, my divine soul, with which I am so inspired to do good. And the good traits that Hashem gave me as well. Okay. And to understand that I'm a conglomeration and that my job is to make a completeness and a unification of myself. Okay. And the way to do that is also through having a real awe of Hashem, a real awe. It's not just a love of Hashem. We've got to have that awe. It's often translated yira as fear. We've got to have that. Okay. We have to have that mixture. And this approach is really very psychologically astute if you want to speak from, today's point of view, in that we're not denying that negative part, but we're also not like the psychologists say, oh, there's no value judgment on it. It's not negative. If you feel anger, if you feel hatred, if you have rage, if you have depression, it's okay. It's real. It's authentic. No. What Rebbe Nachman's saying is we need to acknowledge we have it, and then we need to work to bring it gently, slowly, speedily, whatever your pace is, into a harmonious whole, into a place where we understand that we are more than the sum of our parts. This is the first kind, okay, of peace, and that is this unity within self. The next kind is reached through first having unity within oneself, says Rebbe Nachman. Why? Because when you have that real self-possession, and which is combined with what I mentioned before, that awe of Hashem, that real understand. I mean, if nothing else, Hashem gave me a soul, I'm alive, I have thoughts, I have feelings. Amazing. I'm not a robot. I'm not an angel either, but I'm not a robot, okay? And he allows me to bechira. He gives me this as his gift. Bechira is free will, freedom of choice, freedom of thought, freedom to think, to figure out. And I take that, and with that, what do I do with all of this awe and this true unity? This is when I pray. Because all our prayers are good and valuable. But when I feel like there isn't part of me that's shut off, shut down, repressed, in denial, I don't have to pretend it didn't happen. Okay, I can say it happened and I can forget about it, but I understand that's part of my whole. I'm going to pray with real faith and belief when I've reached this point. Okay, I'm not just going to pray. I don't know how you feel sometimes, but sometimes when I'm praying, I feel like I'm just praying with this part of my head, or just this part of my head, or this part of my throat. You want to pray down from your heart too. You want to pray with every part of yourself, your whole body, your whole soul, everything. A unified force. We have those times. It's nice if we have them every day. Sometimes we do. Sometimes we're blessed to have them every day, but very often we feel them on big holidays, Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, Shavuot coming up, where we feel so uplifted. That upliftingness comes from unification. And when we are able to do this, this leads to the second kind of shalom. What's that? That's the shalom where There's peace between us and everybody, and peace in all the worlds. It's a tall order, but each of us is a necessary part of making that happen. Okay. That's the first comment on that. I have so much more. I want to get to a few more, and then we'll take questions. Okay. Okay. So we have this idea of the individual within himself. And then Rebbe Nachman goes a step further than that. And he says, where we're making peace between the disparate events of our times. And with that, what we're seeing, okay, is that even if things look bad, are painful, we won't even talk about what's going on in Israel, are so mind-boggling, heart-rending, we understand that Hashem is hidden in there somewhere. It comes from Hashem. That's that next kind of unification and completeness. It doesn't mean we turn our backs. Oh, Hashem's there, it's good. No, we still have to help. But what it means is we still understand it's all from Hashem. Okay. And when we do, we get to a really key point. When everything comes from Hashem, which it does, but when for us, it's real for us. Okay. We miss the bus. We find out we have to pay a lot more taxes than we thought we had to pay. We have we have to get a cavity filled or a root canal or whatever it is. When any of that happens, okay, when we understand that it's from Hashem, and ultimately Hashem is Tov U'Mitiv, he is good and he does good. Ultimately, the level we can't really appreciate because it hurts, right? But when we believe it, we're going to start to feel love for each other. A real love, even and maybe even especially for the people that you want no part of. Why? Because we understand that they too come from Hashem and that their situation is from Hashem, and that whatever they did or didn't do, whatever that is on that list, okay, yeah, they had some free choice. But ultimately, if it affected you or if it affected someone else, ultimately, the deepest, most hidden level, that was from Hashem too. So that's the next kind of completeness. And Rebbe Nachman says, so we're going to look at that. I'm not going to click back to the share screen of the camps because it'll take me too long to figure it out again. I have to get more fluent in this. But divisiveness is what really leads people to atheism, and atheism leads to divisiveness. A lack of belief and connection in Hashem, okay, will lead you to not genuinely care about other people. And a lack of caring about other people will also lead you to not really believing in Hashem. Nothing causes a person to lose their connection to Hashem more than people problems with other people. And so there's a subtle lesson in this parsha. We look at that camp and we see the subtle lesson. Each person was counted for sure. And each person belonged to a tribe and knew where they belonged also for sure. Today, we don't necessarily know our tribe. Some Kohanim do and some Levim do, and generally we know the rest of us, Yisrael, okay? We don't really necessarily know our tribes. We don't coexist necessarily with our tribes. But what we do know is that it doesn't really matter because we can reach Hashem wherever we are in that camp. Okay. And although this is a matter of great interest, and I love these charts, like I just find it fascinating. I wanted to do the Degalim, the flags as well. And I kept myself up way too late trying to do, I'm learning on the Adobe Illustrator how to do this. And it just kept me up way too late. And I got like 2 flags in and gave up. But the idea of what it means, each tribe. So meanwhile, I can tell you one thing. tonight is Rosh Chodesh Sivan. I know for a lot of us here, this is our birthday month. For Charlene, it's her birthday month. I don't know, maybe no, not for Sarah. For Hannah, it's her birthday month. For me, maybe I'm sure for other people too, that I just can't think of off the top of my head. This month is associated with the tribe of Zevulun. There are other tribes sometimes associated with it as well. So we understand that each tribe also has its time, 12 months, 12 tribes, 12 flags, 12 mini camps within the larger camps, and so on. We each have our place. And God willing, when Mashiach comes, we're going to learn really what we belong to as a big picture and as a small picture as well. All right, everyone. Are there any comments or questions before we wrap up today?
Hi, Rivka.
Charlene.
Hi. I just also thank you so much for this class. You put so much together. I don't know how you do it, but
because I love it. That's why. Baruch Hashem, and thanks to Eleonora for making it possible. Really, you have a question?
Yeah, I wanted to say actually a comment. I read it. I read that the month of Sivan has to do with receiving, just like receiving the Torah. And I was wondering what you think about it.
So I think that's certainly true. And I will tell you, there's a fascinating book that I can recommend. And I think I've recommended it. I think I recommended it to Rachel. It's called Above the Zodiac. Okay. And it's by Rabbi Matityahu Glazerson. And I know Rachel's going to reach for that book right now. There you go. Oh, that's a new cover. Okay. And what it is an explanation of the months and the tribes and their meanings and the mazalot, the constellations, and so on and so forth. So if you're interested in this topic, that book is so interesting. He takes from various Kabbalistic texts, from the Midrashim, from the Gemara, and he just pulls it all together. So yeah, we should be ready to receive the Torah in a few days. Speaking of which, okay, Shavuot, it's Shavuos, Sunday night, and Monday and Tuesday. So we will not meet next week. And FYI, I'm actually planning on taking the whole week off. If you're in any other classes with me, public or private, I'm hoping to take the whole week off to write. Just so everyone knows, I'm getting started with Hannah's help I've already started with Hannah's help, who she has transcribed hundreds and Rochelle as well too. There she is, Rachel, there she is. Hundreds of lessons. I'm getting started on the second book in the series, May You Have a Day. If anyone wants to be a part of it or help me with it or support me in it, please. It takes a lot of people to put a book like this together. If you don't have this book, please go to Amazon.com and get your copy. And so I plan to take that week off, a kind of mini sabbatical, a mini shmita to sit and write. There you go. Rachel always has the book. I don't know if this cracks anyone else up, but Rachel always has the book right there. Whatever the book is, she's got it. She spends all her time learning. She's a very smart woman. Okay. Any other questions or comments, thoughts, ideas? Nope.
This is Sarah.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
Hi, how are you? You know what? I just want to comment that sometimes listening to a lot of this information, it's very easy to forget and then be reminded of things. It's like what you say about repetition, how important it is. But there's always at least one major important thing that you say that I take with me the whole day. So today I really liked what you said about how when you really love Hashem, you can love other people. Yeah. And vice versa. And that really clicked and made sense to me today because, yeah, I can't describe it right now.
You don't have to describe it, but this is really, so I'm glad you brought that up. And this is, this is again, the beauty like of the Torah, which is what we were discussing in the beginning about this sort of holologic and holographic sense that Hashem has. Whatever we need is there for us. And it's certainly there for us in the Parsha. And whatever you hear, you can get a message from anyone or anything. And it's nice when it's directly from the Torah. But this idea of unity is very important. And we have many calls for unity. But when people are broken, you can't put them all together and call the group whole. And obviously, until worldwide redemption and Mashiach, we'll always never be completely complete, but there is a level of completeness that we can reach in this world that really entails us loving other people and loving ourselves. And when we do that, then love of Hashem, these all go hand in hand. You can't just say, I love Hashem, but I hate that Jew. I mean, you can't, and you can't, it all has to work together, and it's very hard. I mean, it's not such an easy task. Meanwhile, thank you, Sarah, for your wonderful comment. Are there any questions, or we're going to wrap up today? Okay. So thank you, everybody, for coming. Unfortunately, we'll miss next week's Parsha. However, I am looking forward to certainly to seeing you, God willing, the week after. And I want to wish you all a Chodesh Tov. It should be a wonderful month for everyone. And we should all be ready to receive the Torah on Shavuot. And everybody should have a good Yom Tov, Chag Sameach, and all the best, everyone. Okay, take care.